Hey guys, so recently there's been a bit of a trend on YouTube where people cover tier lists on any subject really, and I have to admit I've become pretty obsessed with them. Even if I don't happen to know much about the subject or have much of an opinion on it, my brain still tells me you have to watch this, you have to see where it goes. I guess I kind of enjoy the analysis that goes into it, and yeah, so I figured naturally a fighting game like Fighterz Frenzy 2 deserves its own tier list, so today I'll be covering that. I decided to not go with the traditional A to F tier, or sorry, S to F tier, just because I think there's a little bit more of organization using this grid because of the topic. It's a fighting game, so we'll start with the obvious top tier to low tier as our first criteria, and the second being whether they're well-rounded versus being faulted. So this is basically having weaknesses and then being well-rounded versus top and low tier. Pretty self-explanatory. So let's start with Saphira. Back in the heyday of Fighterz Frenzy 2 when it was just her and Grayson, she was always pretty dominant. She would kick his ass consistently. And that's well in due part to the fact that she's fast and deals a lot of damage. She's even stronger now because she can silence, and just the fact that even though she has supposedly her weakness is low HP, I think it's pretty well offset by her speed and mobility. So, first off, very high tier, very strong, and decently well-rounded. Next, Grayson. Grayson's our big boy next to Iron Fiend. So he has a lot of HP and low speed. Now, normally this is bad. However, to his credit, he has a defensive mechanic, so even if he's easy to hit, with good counterplay, he can turn damage into his advantage. So that's very strong. However, a big fault that he has is that his abilities are pretty slow and easy to predict. So if he's charging at you with his rune shard, you just step out of the way, and all that damage is kind of useless. So lots of damage, defensive, tanky. Great in most situations, so he's well-rounded in that sense because he can defend himself and deal damage. But what holds him back from top tier is that he's slow and easy to predict. Still a great hero, I'd say. Definitely B tier. We'll put him there, right in the middle of both top and well-rounded. Luxar's next. He shares a similar, similar set to Grayson in that he has high HP and low speed, and high damage potential, high stun potential, which Grayson doesn't have. However, it is, and I've spoken about this during his preview, is that there is a sweet spot in his range in that you can just mess with him. You can just totally deal damage to him, and he can't fight back. While he can shoot arrows at you and stun you while he's close, there is a sweet spot in which you can totally destroy any Luxar player. That said though, his stun potential is nothing to scoff at. Okay, you have to give Luxar players respect when you play against them, otherwise you'll get punished pretty hard. He's strong in that sense, so he belongs in a similar tier to Grayson. However, he is more faulted, I'd say, because you can push a Luxar into a corner and he doesn't have the same defense as Grayson does. Let's put up Alta next. So even with her rework, I still find that this hero is pretty weak. She is fast and she can heal, so she's a very mobile target, similar to Saphira. However, she does not account for that weakness with her damage. So her damage potential is pretty low, I'd say. And at that, you're relying on having to chain your damage. So you have to work on amplified targets, really lay into them. And it's reliant on you, taking advantage of opportunities. And in that sense, it's situational. So for both those reasons, I have to put her in the lower end. And, there are some pretty big faults there. Not huge, like, game-ending weaknesses, but she's in the low tier for sure. Let's take a look at the Iron Fiend next, because he also received a rework to his kit. Before, pretty garbage tier, honestly. Bad design on me, I'll take that, for sure. But now, I definitely think he's very strong. He's a very aggressive hero, deals a lot of damage. Similar to Luxray, you really have to respect an Iron Fiend player. Otherwise, you're gonna get destroyed in a few hits. So the fact that he can charge from across the battlefield, has ways to increase his damage. You know, he's constantly floating between low and high HP. Puts him in a decently well-rounded spot. His weakness is that he is pretty big. You know, he has the biggest hitbox in the game, and that puts him further back. However, his damage and stun potential puts him pretty high. Pretty high in the tier, but is less well-rounded because you can see him as a one-trick pony in that he's just good for full aggression. Next, let's take a look at Toffee Ra. So once again, post-patch, she has a new ultimate, and I just gotta say, it's a ton of fun to play. You know, you can just fly around your opponent, just lob out massive amounts of fireballs, just constantly deal damage. However, her playstyle still hasn't changed. She needs a good casting rhythm, and what I mean by that is, you know, you need to have your ultimate up, constantly casting spells as soon as you can, constantly try to deal as much damage as possible, because that's the only way, the best offense is the best defense for her. She has very low mobility and no defensive mechanics, so in the start of the game, when your ultimate's on a long cooldown and your spells are also on cooldown, it's a huge weakness, you know. But once you get into that rhythm, very strong. So I'd say she's middle of the road. She's balanced in faults and weaknesses, but still very strong. So we'll put her somewhere up here. Next, let's take a look at Lada. Right off the bat, very well-rounded. I'm gonna stick her at the far right, just right away. That's a very easy decision, because let's look at her kit. I mean, she has a silence that also is a mobility thing. She has a counterattack that makes her immune to stuns, you know, and when she's flying, she has a stun, and she has a lifesteal, so just crazy amounts of versatility. And she flies too. I mean, she has everything. So that's definitely her greatest strength. That said, though, one thing that's holding her back just a little bit is that, I mean, her damage is on the lower side, and also difficult to play. I mean, it's kind of a hard judgment call when to switch in between flight and fight. You're managing your shade spectrum, you know, so definitely something that holds her back a little bit. But still, I'd say very strong in the higher end. This is kind of weird because I haven't done a hero preview on this guy yet, but Sir Alistair is the 8th and I'd say final hero, unfortunately. He is very fast. He's a ranged hero. As you can see, he's got a little gun there. Don't want to spoil too much about him. However, his thing is space denial, so he's got a lot of ways to zone enemy heroes. However, similar to Alta, low damage potential. Does not offset for his low health enough. I don't think he's that strong, unfortunately. So we'll put him in the lower tier, and definitely faulted. We'll talk a bit more about that during his hero preview. So, with all said and done, this is our tier list. This is the final choice that I've made. If you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it, because everybody has a different view. Everyone has different heroes that they love to play, different play styles, tons of opinions, and that's great. That's definitely the beauty of fighting games and heroes. Everything is different to everybody. So, that being said, I'll just go ahead and let it fade to black.